Hello, my name is Dr. Chris Robinson, and I'm a professor in the anthropology department at the City University of New York's Graduate Center. Today, I will be discussing how to use checkpoint to collect semi-landmark curves on the crowns and roots of molars. So part of our project is to collect three-dimensional landmarks on the tooth crown and roots, and to use those to determine how well the shape of the teeth correlates with the shape of the mandible. Now, my colleagues and I had created protocols to collect landmarks on the teeth, but the protocols we were using were extremely time-consuming. First, we would extract an isosurface from a CT scan in checkpoint. That isosurface would have most of the mandibular bone around the roots removed, but not all of it, because if we removed all of it, the tooth roots would also go away. We would then open that isosurface in GeoMagic and very carefully remove every bit of mandibular bone around the tooth roots. That obviously took a long time. Fortunately, David Wiley, one of the creators of Checkpoint, was able to demonstrate to me, and I will demonstrate to you shortly, how to collect landmarks directly from CT scans without having to remove the mandibular bone around the tooth roots ahead of time. All right, so let's look here at what one of our scans looked like after we had extracted the mandibular bone. So here is a bonobo mandible. You can see all of the mandibular bone around this tooth root is now gone. And we have collected semi-landmarks from lateral to medial, from anterior to posterior around this tooth root, so defining the shape of the tooth root. And then also you can see there are landmarks around the crown of the molar. Now I'm going to show you how to do this a lot faster than the way that we did this. Okay, so here is the same mandible, just the CT scan. I'm in the volume tab here, and you can see the entire mandible is here. It's not missing any of the bits like we just saw. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is orient the tooth root so that we're collecting data on what we want to collect the data on. So we use this tool here. You can see a little slider here that slides the plane back and forth, back and forth. All right, so something like right about there. So here is the lovely tooth root. You can see it nicely right there. So what we're going to do is orient it using these crosshairs here. We're going to take the crosshair to the very tip of the tooth root. And then as we go out, we're going to get a circle that we can spin so that the tooth root is oriented along the long axis of the crosshairs. Move this slightly so it's right on the tip. And slightly do that. There we go. Now we want it oriented in both the axial and sagittal planes. So I'm going to zoom in here and move these crosshairs a little bit so they are on the tooth root here, on the tip here. Slide them a little bit. Okay, just make sure that's in the same place still. That's a little bit off. There we go. Sagittal plane. All right. Let's rotate that a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now you've got the tooth root oriented so that the long axis of these crosshairs goes right down the middle of it. Okay, so now to collect the landmarks, we have to go to these surface tabs. The surface tab will show you the entire surface along with everything that the mandible was scanned with. So this is whatever was enclosing the mandible when it was micro-CT scanned. Obviously, we don't want that in there when we're trying to collect landmarks. So we go over to this histogram here and we move our cursor up and down. You can see there's a long flat part here and then a little hill at the bottom. This is basically the mandible material here. All of this is extraneous material. So holding down the control button, we left click somewhere in here, and that's going to give us a mandible surface. We can get rid of the old surface by clicking on it and deleting. So now we've got a new ISO surface right here of just the material we want. Okay, let's collect some landmarks. So if we hit the axial, you can see here's our axial view again. You can see the outline of the tooth root very nicely there. Let's zoom in, which you can do. You hold down Control and you move the wheel of your mouse, and that will zoom in for you. Okay, so here's our tooth root outline. To collect a curve around this outline, you go to the Curve tool here, click on it, then you hold down the Shift button, and you collect your first landmark. Obviously, we don't want it that big. So this right here makes the landmarks bigger and smaller. We're going to make it smaller and smaller and smaller, as small as we can get. We put it as precisely as possible. Here's the first landmark. We're going to put the second one right about here. Third one right on the tip. Fourth one somewhere over here. And then fifth one up here. All right, so with 5 landmarks, I've now defined the curve around that tooth root. If you go to the Landmarks tab and you zoom in, you'll be able to see those landmarks. So here they are. If you would like to see them as a curve, go over here and curves. There's your curve. So that's a curve along the outline of that tooth root. You can define how many semi-landmarks you want along that curve by changing the semi-landmark density. I'm going to set it at 29. So we'll now have 29 semi-landmarks defining that curve. And again, if we zoom in, you can see the individual semi-landmarks. Let's go back and take a second curve. Go back to the surface and go to the axial view. You can still see your landmarks there. What you're going to want to do is take your crosshairs here and put them right on the tip of the root, right in the middle of that landmark. Then we go to the sagittal view, and you'll see there's your landmark right there. So again, we're going to collect 5 landmarks. Hold down the Shift button, collect 1, 2. Now we can't click on a landmark exactly at that point. We got to do one slightly to the side of it. 4, and 5. So what we're going to do then is merge these 2 points. So you just have one point defining the tip of the root for both curves. The way that we do that is you go to this little hand tool here. You click on the point that you want to define the tip first. Then you click on the other point you just took. Now you got both points selected. There is a merge tool right here that combines the red and white landmarks so that they're both defined by the red landmark's position. Boom. All right, now we've got our second curve. So if we go back and look at landmarks again, you can see there's your second curve, not looking so good so far. Let's again change the semi-landmark density to 29. And this is something that often happens. You often get the semi-landmarks going all over the place because if you look at the surface here, there's lots of extraneous material that the semi-landmarks could be latching onto basically. So I'm going to move this a little bit and see if that helps. We can look right here. We can actually have the curves viewable. So we can go in really close here and see those curves up close. And now you can see they look a lot better. Just by moving the tip there slightly this direction, the semi-landmarks for both curves now are adhering just to the surface of the root. All right, so there's curve 2. And curve 1. All right, so now we have an outline going medial lateral and anterior posterior. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to collect landmarks around the occlusal surface of the molar. So let's go back to this right here shows you the isosurface again. Got to back out. And so we're going to go into the molar and again create a curve around the whole occlusal surface. So click on the curve tool, hold down the shift button, and we'll start here. Now let's look at it from occlusal. Okay, we'll start here, 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 here. Now you can stop yourself. You let go of the shift button, move around, zoom in. Now, if you want to start your curve again, you click on the landmark, hold the shift button, and you can keep going. So again, click on whatever your last landmark was, hold the shift button, and you can keep going with your curve. So I'm nearly all the way around, shift, and there, and last one over there. Now, I would like to merge the first and last point that you took. So again, we go to the hand tool here. You're going to select the first one and then the second one. And again, hit the merge button and it merges everything together. Now, if you would like to change the position of any of these, just click on them and drag. Click and drag. And click and drag. All right, so reasonable outline of the molar shape. All right, so that's how you collect semi-landmarks on the occlusal crown. If you go to the landmarks tab again, we can change the density of those semi-landmarks, make it 41, make it a lot of them. And so now you have two curves to define the outline of the root and one curve to define the outline of the tooth crown. This project is entitled Collaborative Research, Integrative Investigation of the Evolution and Biomechanics of Mandibular Form in Extant Great Apes and Early Australopithecus. This project documents variation in the internal and external shape of the mandible in the extant great apes and the early human species Australopithecus anamensis and Australopithecus afarensis. We also explore various factors that could be influencing the three-dimensional shape differences within and among these species. One of the variables that could potentially affect the shape of the mandible is the size and shape of the teeth, since the mandible must have the space to house those teeth. Please note that the methods described here were developed by my research team in conjunction with David Wiley. If you do plan to use these exact methods to landmark molars in your research before we have published the methods, please reach out to me at my email address, which is chris.robinson@bcc.cuny.edu. Thank you again.